Welcome everybody to the first mini lecture of the final unit of the Sustainable Urbanism course. And once again, I'm speaking to you from Stockholm, Sweden, where I do some consulting and I have an appointment here at one of the universities. You may remember I was speaking to you from Stockholm in the very first video, actually the introduction to the course instructor, from this very square, in fact, where the Nobel Museum is located. And as you can see, it's the Christmas market. It's a very lively scene. Everyone is enjoying themselves and doing some shopping. One of the great urban spaces of Stockholm, and certainly a great example of a wonderful public space. What I'm going to do is go back in this unit to that first video and the first course introduction video and use those as a way to recap where we've gotten to, a sort of overview of the ideas of the course and the key conclusions that I'd like you to be thinking about. Hello everybody, I'm Michael Mahaffey and I'll be your instructor for the Sustainable Urbanism course. I'm actually speaking to you from Stockholm, Sweden, which is one of the places where I do consulting work, and I happen to be right now. In addition to teaching, I consult around the world in a number of different cities for city governments, national governments, for the United Nations, for NGOs, and for local developers. It's a really interesting career, and I'll tell you a little bit about it and share with you some of the lessons that I've been able to gather over my years of practice, and give you maybe a sense of what it's like in the profession, consulting on sustainable urbanism and actually getting projects built and doing really interesting things. Stockholm is a very interesting place, and I hope you're like me, because I love exploring places like this, studying places like this, understanding what makes them work and what makes them sustainable, and how they use a mix of modes of travel, and sure, how they use technology, but also how they do what all great cities do, which is afford a great quality of life with greater efficiency. So we'll study a number of examples like this, and I hope you'll really enjoy it. I certainly do. Places like Stockholm remind us that it's not simply a matter of bolting on technology, it's also a matter of how urban form actually works, how a place like Stockholm actually works to produce the great efficiencies and the great synergies of a place like this. One of the intriguing facts about Stockholm is that the metrics are quite good for sustainable urbanism. The greenhouse gas emissions per capita, for example, are something on the order of 1/6 of what they are for average residents of the United States. And that's a very intriguing fact and something that we should look into more carefully and try to understand how they do it. Because clearly people in Stockholm are not 1/6 as wealthy as people in the United States, or not 1/6 as happy as people in the United States. There's something going on there that allows them to be 6 times more efficient with their resources and with their consumption patterns, and yet to maintain a very high quality of life at the same time. So in Stockholm, as in other places, it's clear that there are things going on that we can learn from and that we need to begin to understand that are very important for our own lives and efforts we're making to be more sustainable as well. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Sustainable Urbanism course tour. I'm your instructor, Michael Mahaffey, and I'm speaking to you today from another very interesting city that I know well, the city of Amsterdam. I've done some research here recently. In fact, I completed my PhD in the Netherlands. And so I can share with you some of the very interesting lessons about what they're doing in Amsterdam today, as well as what Amsterdam as a city offers us as a series of lessons about how cities work and how they produce the great efficiencies as well as the great productivity and the great quality of life of a place like Amsterdam. I think it's very important that we learn to share lessons between cities and between countries as we try to understand the important issues of sustainable urbanism. And places like Amsterdam are playing a really important role in doing that, I think, in providing a research body of evidence for us to understand what's working and what's not working. Now, on that note, let's turn to the structure of the course, and I'll go over with you what we'll be doing and the things that we're going to ask you to produce over the course as well. By the way, I'm now in my home office in Portland, Oregon, which is another very interesting city that offers us some useful lessons about sustainable urbanism that we'll talk about a little bit also. By now, I hope you've had a look at the syllabus and the course outline. And if you have, you've seen that we're going to have a pretty busy 11 units packed into just 8 weeks. So I'll do my best to keep the requirements very clear to you and not overwhelm you with too much in too short a time. There is going to be a fair amount of reading, but during those times I'm going to reduce some of the other requirements for you and make it as palatable as possible. And my goal is also to make it interesting and enjoyable, which should make it go more smoothly too. But of course, with only 8 weeks, we're going to have some weeks that we'll have 2 units, as you see here. The other weeks that we'll only have 1, either because of holidays or because of exams. And you'll notice that I've stretched out the assignments, the due dates, to give you as much time as possible. And again, that's to make this as manageable as possible given the amount of ground that we're going to cover. I know that many of you are balancing work or other commitments in your lives, and as somebody who has done that myself, I'm very sympathetic. So each unit will start off with a reading, and then there'll be 2 mini lectures from me, very short, just going over the reading and some of the impacts. Then there are other materials that we'll be looking at during some of the weeks, although during the weeks when we have more reading, I'll minimize that so I don't overload you. And then you'll have the discussion board every week where you'll have a comment and then you'll post a reply comment as well, and that's a deliverable that you're required to produce. Then we'll have each unit a short 1 or so pages essay, simply reflecting back to me your response to the question that I'm going to pose to you that helps you to think about the topics we've been discussing and gives me a sense of how well you understand that. And then 2 midterm exams and the final. Now on the grading, what we're going to do is the discussion board is really just whether you participate or not, although we're going to certainly look and make sure that you've completed your comments and that you've demonstrated a comprehension of ideas. You're not just, saying something that's nonsense. We obviously want you to just enjoy that process and get interested in the topic, but those will be pass-fail essentially. Then the exams are simply going to be percentage based on grading that assess how accurately you can describe the key points, including the facts and figures, a typical sort of multiple choice exam format. And then the writing assignments, we're going to look for how well you demonstrate your comprehension of the ideas. And the writing is really important for us to be able to understand that, understand how well you're grasping the material, and frankly, to give you some exercise in communicating these kinds of ideas. We all need to do that in the professions to be able to communicate clearly, and we're going to ask you to do that as well. And in that case, there are 11 of those, and the maximum is 4 points for if you exceed the demonstration of the learning outcomes, and that would give you 44 points. We actually only have 40 points for the writing assignment, so we'll drop the lowest grade of that. And then if you barely meet, you'll get 3.0, 3 points. If you adequately meet, it'll be 3.5 points, and so on. Just to go over the learning outcomes, I'm not going to cover these in great detail now. You can read them more carefully, but essentially we want to make sure that you can describe the key attributes of sustainable urbanism, that you can understand that in the context of the evolution of urban history and particularly the rise of 20th century models and where we are today. describe current developments in the practice of sustainable urbanism today, the metrics, the rating systems, and other things, and then particularly talk about the work of an urban economist named Jane Jacobs, who I'll talk about in a moment, who's really constitutes the core reading of the course. The book that she wrote called The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And some of you may already be familiar with this book. Some of you may have even read it. I think it's a great framework for our discussion this semester because even though it was before the era when we were talking about sustainable urbanism, so many of the concepts that she set out are exactly those concepts that we need to think about in terms of how cities sustain themselves, how they endure, or how they decline, and how they fail. And there, of course, are technological aspects to that have come since Jacobs wrote the book, and we'll get to those. But I think Jane Jacobs gives us a very important framework for understanding urbanism in general and sustainable urbanism more specifically. So the first couple of weeks we're going to be looking at introductory concepts, an introduction to the course and to the basic concepts of sustainable urbanism, the metrics and so on. Then the core part of the course is really going to be focused on the Jane Jacobs book. And that will be the bulk of the reading for the course. There'll be a fair amount of reading during that part of the course. And in order to not overload you, I'm going to cut back on some of the other assignments and other reading and other videos and so on. And then finally, we'll have a recap of some of the recent trends in sustainable urbanism and the newer practices, the newer technologies. And one particular important event is the UN Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development called Habitat 3. So that will bring us right up to the current frontier of the profession. I'll be able to give you frontline reporting on what's going on there, and I think that will give us some really interesting aspects to the course in particular. So I'm going to just briefly run through the units. Please spend a little more time looking through them and also looking through the Jane Jacobs text. You'll see a lot of these topics. The first unit will simply introduce the concept of sustainable urbanism and clarify what we're talking about. The second unit will talk about the history of urbanism and the sustainability issues within that. And how cities have dealt with a number of challenges over their evolution, including climate change in the past. The third unit will bring us into the Jacobs reading, where she talks in her first chapter about the rise of modern reform movements that were meant to cure the perceived ills of 19th century cities, and the medicine may have been worse than the disease in some ways. Unit 4, we're going to zero in a little more into some of the Jacobs concepts of how sidewalks work, how parks and neighborhoods work in terms of their structure. Unit 5, how the what she calls the generators of diversity work to make more diverse, vibrant urban environments, mixed use, small blocks, age buildings, and concentration or compactness. Then we'll have a recap exam covering that material. It'll be fairly easy, open book format, but we want to make sure that you're familiar with the concept before we go much further. Then we'll jump into some other concepts from Jacobs, forces of decline and regeneration. Why do cities decline? How do they regenerate? What are some of the particular issues around that? Different tactics. How do we deal with those challenges? How do we make cities more affordable? How do we resist gentrification? How do we have mixed mode transportation and all the other things that we're dealing with on a routine basis? I can tell you in my own practice, it's extremely relevant to what we're doing today. Unit 8 will be the last unit dealing with Jacobs, and that'll deal with what she called the kind of problem a city is. That's the title of her last chapter, and we'll talk about the kind of problem a sustainable city is in particular, talking about the backdrop of how we understand problems like city dynamics and sustainability and how our thinking has been changed over the last half century. And certainly Jacobs has played a very significant role in our profession as one of the most prominent voices in that new thinking. So Unit 9 will move beyond Jacobs. We'll talk about quantifications, certification programs, metrics, and other tools that we use, technological tools like infrastructure systems and integrated urban systems and neighborhood systems. And we'll look at a number of those issues as well as economic issues. Then we'll have one more recap exam, which again will come from the readings and lectures. Then Unit 10 will be a very interesting recap on Habitat 3, the conference I was telling you about. And I'll give you a sort of frontline report on that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the implications of what the outcome document is called the New Urban Agenda, what that's going to mean for our profession, which is probably a very significant implication. Unit 11 will be our final unit, and we'll talk about implementing the new urban agenda, or the sustainable urbanism agenda by any other name. And we'll have a chance to really reflect on all the things that we've covered and what they mean for us, for you personally, for me personally, in my own practice, because as I've said, I'm a practitioner as well, and I'm struggling with these things just as you are. And so we can have a good discussion about that, about where we are going in our respective careers and how you might be involved in this career in one way or another. So then the last thing we'll do, of course, is the final exam, which will be from all of the readings of all of the units, and it'll be a recap of all of that material. So again, I hope you're going to really enjoy this course. I certainly do enjoy studying places like this and getting to know all of their successes as well as their lessons learned. Okay, that's a good place to stop, and we'll come back during the second mini lecture and have some final thoughts about the course and setting you up for the final exam.